morning. I think all of us will enjoy the extra light, which is going to be great. So as Kurt mentioned, I've had my PR firm now 25 years plus, and still as enjoyable as ever. So what we're going to do today is walk through Kurt is actually running right now the PowerPoint. So we're going to, I guess, just get that into presentation mode. And I'll go ahead and give you guys, Kurt said about 20 minutes so that we leave some time for questions. And he has this presentation. So for you guys, in order to get the presentation afterwards, Kurt can get that out to all of you. And that has all my contact information as well. I would say some of you, that I've met today, I would like to follow up with, particularly Sharon, who does videos. We're doing a ton of videos right now for our clients. There was somebody else. Well, anyway, a few of you I'd love to follow up with, just to see how we might be able to work together. And so I think Kurt has the cover slide. We can go to the next slide. And some of you have mentioned this today. So as a small business, the one honor you don't want is to be the best kept secret. So people can't do business with you clearly if they don't know who you are. So one thing, one honor we never want is to be the best kept secret, and really PR. There's, of course, a whole arsenal of vehicles that everyone knows. You need your website, and you want to post on social media. You want to advertise to who you think is most important if you can afford that. PR is really a very important marketing vehicle. So if we want to go to next slide, I thought this was interesting. So Al Rees and Jack Trout wrote a book called Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. And he has a more recent book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Branding, where he said, the birth of a brand is achieved through public relations, not advertising. So that was a pretty big deal because these were big ad guys, but in today's world, PR is particularly important. So what is PR? We can go to the next slide. So PR, one definition, there's many, but public relations is a management function that helps to establish and maintain mutual lines of communication, understanding, acceptance, cooperation between the organization and its publics. So public relation as a function is bigger than just publicity, but publicity is how we get that public relations. We'll talk a little bit about that. So if we move to the next slide. So when I talked to you guys before, many years ago, I talked about my kind of the way I look at the various vehicles on something we call a marketing vehicle pyramid. So public relations and advertising are two marketing functions that have broad reach. So it's broad reaching and it's a low cost per lead, or CPM is a media buying term that means cost per thousand. So PR and advertising really create what I would call air cover. They're more about image and awareness for your business, whereas things like, direct marketing, whether it's email marketing or direct mail, trade shows and events, sales support, these are more one-to-one vehicles. To get the best bang for your buck from marketing communications, you need to have the broad reaching as well as the stuff at the top of the pyramid. So this just gives you a little way to think about what we're talking about today, which is really the public relations function. If we go to the next slide, we can talk about why PR is so important in today's marketplace. It's always important, but it's really important during a pandemic. One thing we've noticed during this pandemic is customers are, if you want to call it flight to safety, they're going back to products and services that they know. So there's all kinds of fear and doubt present, which influence the buying decision, which a lot of people don't even think about. And back in the day, IBM came up with one of the best definitions for this fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which they called the FUD factor. And the goal of marketing and marketing communications, in particular PR, is really to replace that fear, uncertainty, and doubt with comfort, stability, and confidence. So if you want to think about that fear, uncertainty, and doubt as something that is always present, and particularly when people first come to know you. So how do you offset this, if you want to call it, almost like a hidden foe, FUD, how do we replace that? And what concerns are underneath that fear, uncertainty, and doubt? Well, some things that are underneath that are, is this company going to be around for a long time, right? I don't want to start working with, let's say, whoever our IT provider was, and then they're out of business, and then I'm in trouble. Okay, so that's one fear. The second is, will I be able to get support after this purchase? Will the manufacturer or service provider be able to support future generations of this product or service? And one that we always know, should I buy this product now when the market leader is coming out with something next quarter? So these are all, if you want to call them, kind of the hidden concerns of FUD that you want to be thinking of in when you're presenting to, whether it's a reporter, whether it's a potential prospect. Make sure you address these kind of hidden foes when you're giving your presentation. So we go to the next slide. What I tried to do was to put the kind of what you should think about into 5 steps. So if we go back to that first step, who is my target market? So we have to think about step 1 really is, who is your target market? Probably the biggest mistake that we see clients and companies make in the very beginning is they try to make their target market way too broad. You want to focus in as much as possible into who that target market is. And one way to do that is to think about, where have I had most of my success in the past? So right now during the pandemic for RMR, we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth in real estate. As someone mentioned on this call, we're seeing tremendous growth in government contracting. Our government contractors and IT staffing firms are doing really well. Some of our insurance clients and things like that, they're growing during the pandemic. So when we're thinking about who is my target market and what is it that they want, try to get that as narrow as possible. This is somewhat contrary to what most people think, because you think, well, if I go after everybody, I'm going to get at least some. And that's a big mistake, because typically you don't have the time or the budget. And in the case of a small business, time is really, really important. So once we figure out who is our target market, we can try to figure out step 2, what kind of core list, what kind of media core list? So what publications, what podcasts, what blogs, what is it that they're reading? What are they listening to? Who's driving that market? And that's why that target market definition is so important. Because when it comes to PR, and we're going to talk to the media, we need to figure out, okay, who is it exactly that we're going to be talking to? So for all of us right here in the room, some publications that we would all want to talk to would include the Washington Business Journal, the Washington Post, all of the local media. If we're trying to, hit locally, it might be Patch. It could be, depending on who it is, Washington Jewish Week, et cetera, et cetera. So you can actually, just by Googling, go and say, in a particular target market, you can say, okay, what is the most important media? Now at RMR, as a PR firm, we have something called Cision that we use. So I can just put in, government IT or real estate or whatever I want. I can get a core list really, really fast. you guys are going to probably need to, do a little more work, but you Google and you think about, okay, what are these people reading that I want to talk to? So very recently we had a financial planner that we've been working with, and he had a new book. And so he wanted to hit our geographic market, but within that market, he wanted to hit business owners. He also wanted to hit people in certain industries, for example, in golfers. And so we did an article, it was about the back nine and how, first part of your life is front nine, second part's back nine. What do we need to think about? And so these were some like unusual placements. We also did some media into the financial market, the investment market. So this thing about who is my target audience will lead you to be able to talk to reporters, editors, and analysts by creating that core list based on who that target market is. So now we can go to the next slide. So in researching your core list, and I would suggest that you start with a top 10 outlet list that can be which editors, which reporters are most important to me. So for our interpreter, client who's here, you may want to think about, okay, the government's great. Am I talking to all different government agencies? And what other, maybe government contractors would be a perfect one for you, could I be talking to? So when we look at that, you now open it up to Washington Technology, Government Computer News, Federal Computer Week, FedScoop, and so on and so forth. It's going to be easy to come up with probably 10 to 20 top complementary people to be able to talk to. When you go onto their website, they have something called an editorial calendar. That allows them to sell advertising. You can look at that editorial calendar to see what are the best fits for my story. And what I would suggest to all of you is to think about, okay, well, what do I need? What do I have to say that is newsworthy? And that can be part of what can help you to do that, is to look at those editorial calendars and see, okay, what is Federal Computer News writing on this year and where do I fit? Or what is Washington Technology writing on and where do I fit? And that will allow you to be able to pitch stories directly to reporters and editors. So we have two professionals at RMR, Lana and Liz, and all they do is talk to reporters and the media. Literally, they talk to them all day, every day. Pretty much 40 hours a week. Reporters their personalities tend to be more auditory. They tend to be, I would say, more introverted, supportive types and supportive, concise styles, if you guys can think of it from a personality standpoint, which means they like just the facts, not a lot of fluff. But they don't mind, particularly TV media and producers, if you can give them the human interest style to the story. So what we find is we need to deal with TV media differently than we deal with, people who are writers, etc. But this editorial calendar is very important because once you have that core list, you can see where your story fits. And then you can use things like press releases to drive that into the market. So if you look now at step 4, so we go to that next slide. Yeah, so there are various PR vehicles. We've talked a little bit about some of them. So for example, we mentioned press releases. So press releases are great to use when you have news. And when we get to the end of this presentation, at rmr.com, we have a section called Marketing Tips, and one of the articles in there is called How to Write the Perfect Press Release. So press releases don't need to be long, but they do need to follow a particular format that reporters like to get this information in. You have your headline, sometimes a subhead, your dateline. You want your meat in the first paragraph of that press release, and then you have the supporting documentation, maybe a quote or two. And so press releases you use for news. For most businesses, I would say you could have anywhere between 4 to 6 to 12 press releases per year. For most of the clients we work with, we're getting out at least 1 press release per month, sometimes more. And for our public companies, it's even more than that, because public companies need to, they have a fiduciary responsibility to be getting out news, and so they do even more. So press releases are a great vehicle. Authored articles around topics of interest, which you will see on those editorial calendars when you look at them, are fantastic for positioning you and your firm as experts in the industry. And as we said before, what was one of the things we're trying to overcome? We're trying to overcome that FUD factor, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So authored articles are great for positioning you as a thought leader. Pitch letters to editors and reporters, that's just letting them know, hey, I'm available for you as a resource. So for example, you know, when one of our clients, VJ, had this idea about the back nine in golf, we took that out to like 5 different outlets and editors, and we got one that said, yeah, I love this. And then we said, okay, how many words? We had 1,500 words. He basically wrote it, we edited it. In that case, because it was financial, it needed to be submitted to compliance, and then the article's been submitted. So I would say for most clients, we're probably placing anywhere between 3 to 5 authored articles a month. And those can actually produce leads. So think about, well, what am I an expert in? I heard someone talking about supplementation and the importance of keeping healthy during a pandemic. So that's a great one. Probably everyone in this room today is an expert in their field. And so letting reporters and editors know I'm available, I can be a resource. They really do appreciate that. Most of them will save your information. And I mean, I can think of one of my clients from way back when, like 15 years ago, someone named Michael Farr, and we got him on CNBC and all these different financial things. They still use, I haven't worked with him for like probably 10 years, but they still use him because now the reporters, editors, producers just go right back to him, and he's on TV all the time. So it's worth the time and effort to let these editors and reporters know you're available as a resource to their stories. And now finally, step 5, which is our last step, which is you use what is called media relations to do the follow-up and follow-through with reporters once you contact them. So if you're going to start this process of PR, it is a little time consuming. So you want to make sure that if that reporter says, I'm not interested right now, but I would be interested a month from now, or they may say, you know, let me have an informational interview with you now. We had a couple of those for VJ that have not turned into placements yet. But that's why it's called media relations, because you need to do that follow-up and follow-through to keep up with these reporters. And that's one of the reasons why we tend to have a consistent amount of press releases and other things over time. Is the nice thing about PR is, unlike most other things in life, you know, where you have diminishing returns, right? PR is one of the few things in life where you get the opposite of that, where it's like a virtuous circle up. The more you talk to the media, the more they're familiar with you, the more they'll use you as a resource, and the more it kind of sometimes takes on a life of its own. We had a client years ago back, if you guys remember the year 2000 stuff, and they were IT, and anyway, we put out some things around that, and one of our clients, Luke Chung from FMS, he was on, and I'm not even sure, maybe it was NBC first, but he ended up doing well on NBC. He's a Harvard graduate. They all called him. Then he was on CNN, then Fox. I mean, it was crazy. Over a 2-week period, he was probably on all of the major media multiple times. So I will say this stuff can take on a life of its own, and it can be extremely powerful. So we just have a few more slides. If we go to the next slide, this is an example of during the pandemic. So one of our clients, 2020 Gene Systems, decided to get into the COVID-19 testing market. And they were very early. So you can see Allison Starling in the middle of this. She's a local ABC reporter, went to the lab, you know, did the story. We had many other placements. We had the Washington Post. We got them on NBC. It was really fantastic, all about their expertise in testing. And we've rolled out a rapid antibody test. So for those people who want to know, hey, maybe I was exposed, I don't know if I have the antibody or not, but I want to know, or maybe, you know, I got it last summer and I want to know if I still have the antibody. So I walked into a Kroger's here in South Carolina the other day, and there was their test, branded under Kroger's, but offering, you know, hey, you know, you can come, you can get your little tests and come back when you're done shopping and we'll have the results. So it's really that easy. And so they're going to independent pharmacies now and doing all of that. So this has been huge for their business. They've literally had their best year ever because the addition of all the testing and things around COVID. So what I am showing you here, because I know it hasn't been the easiest time for small businesses, but if you bring the right message out to reporters at the right time, you're going to get a wonderful response. So we have two more case studies to take a look at. Dices, I mentioned, IT consulting. Dices is an example of another company which has grown to nearly $1 billion in the IT staffing market. And one thing they've done throughout the pandemic is to do acquisitions of other businesses. So he's been on a buying spree. They have a really huge one coming up, which will get him to his goal, which was to be $1 billion. I think it was by 2020, so he's late by a year. Very Methuselah, very impressive CEO. There are ways to position, you know, your products and services through PR, also to position your founder as a thought leader, as we talked about, through authored articles, through awards and all of that. These are all vehicles under the PR bucket. Can be just huge and really pave the way for great success. I know with Dices, we're actually going into our 11th year with them. And then finally, I put in here a great women-owned business called Evans. You can see here, and when we talk about different relationships with reporters, that's Sue Evans at the Washington Post, with a reporter named Tom Heath. And actually, Tom Heath is someone that we've worked with over the years. Same thing with Washington Business Journal. I can tell you one thing about the Business Journal, they've changed kind of the way they cover people. So if you want to get into the Business Journal, you have to go to them first with what is called an exclusive. If by the time you do a press release with them, they actually won't write about you. So they're kind of unique in that right now, that they've gone to this, we'll only take exclusives. I kind of get it. It's very competitive out there. So a lot of times what we'll do then, if we have a good story for the Business Journal, is we'll take it to them first, see if they want it before we do the press release. The Post doesn't care if something's been released. You know, they don't care that much about exclusives, but exclusives are something that you can use as a trade-off with the media to get feature stories or to get feature placements. Like a lot of times we'll do a broadcast exclusive, a radio exclusive, and a print exclusive before we'll actually drop a press release. So these are tools that you can use to get press, but you can see with the what is called earned media, that it has a lot of credibility. And as we said at the very beginning, the credibility is extremely important because of that FUD factor that's out there. And so it can make you immediately safe. Right now we're working with a startup called SourcePath, and we've gotten a couple features on the CEO and about the company, and he's now using that PR to line up his investor money. So he understood, because we had worked with this is Chuck Canton. We had worked with him at ICOR. He saw the power of PR and how it helped ICOR, and eventually they were acquired by Vonage. And so he knew how important it was, and even before he's funded, he's already doing the PR. So final couple of slides. What do you need to make PR work for you? Time, planning, reinforcement, and commitment, or as we say, the secret sauce, as many of you know, is consistency over time. Consistency over time is absolutely critical. A lot of people, I don't want to say they expect magic from public relations, but because we already have the relationships with the reporters and the producers and everything else, they think we can just go out there and instantly make them famous. I worked with AOL back in the day. So I worked with Steve Case. We worked with them as a startup. There's never been a company that I've worked with where they were instantly famous or instantly successful, ever. And even though some of them look like they were, because you may not have heard about, I worked with AOL back in the mid-90s, and then probably by 99, they were more or less a household name because of all the disc and everything. But that took hard work and effort and plodding along, just like every other business. So it does take time. Time is key. You need to plan, because what I would suggest that you do is take a 12-month calendar and say, okay, I'm going to do 4 press releases this year. I'm going to try to get 4 authored articles. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy. I'm going to start, looking at the editorial calendars and pitching to specific reporters. The reinforcement is key. Never promise a reporter you'll do something and then don't follow up with it. So important, because they want to use you as a resource. And again, like everything, and our person who's doing the health and nutrition, everything takes commitment. So you do need to really commit to a program, be consistent with it, and over time it will pay off for you. I have worked with very small businesses. I was a mentor for Montgomery County, and I know Sheila Kotry, who has a company called Moti. She used these tips. She did it herself. She was very successful, and I ran into her a couple years ago, and she said, doing that PR really was the dramatic difference for my business. So we know it works. I know it's a little hard to do yourself, but you can start small. Like I said, maybe 1 thing per month. Just put it on a calendar and get to it. On RMR's website, what you can see right here, we have rmr.com. We're lucky we got our domain name early. So many people have tried to buy this domain from me. We have something called marketing tips. And so many of the things that I've talked about today are there, and fleshed out articles, which we invite you to, come and get. And then final slide, I do have a book. It's called Market to the Max, which we go back 1. You can see
I can't go backwards. I don't know how to do it. There it is.
Right on, there it is. You'll see it right on our website. You can buy it right at rmr.com. Also follow us on Facebook. I'd love to link in with you guys. And of course, Twitter. We try to practice what we preach in terms of, doing everything we talk about and then doing it for RMR too. So it works. All this stuff, there's no magic to it, but it does take consistency over time. Yeah. Great. So how are we doing on time, Kurt? Do we have time for a couple questions?
Yes, I would.
Robyn.
I'd like to have a couple questions, please.
Robyn.
And I'll start it off by asking PR regarding obviously this was a lot about magazines and newspapers and publications and things, but of course everything's gone electronic and people are doing a lot of blogs these days. I imagine that you're promoting that. Social media and blogging and that sort of thing too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The thing you need to track with all of these various vehicles you have a choice of, and that's why I said think about who influences your particular market, because you have to see what kind of engagement you get. So if RMR does something, I also recommend you communicate to your own, what I call your house list of people who know you, who like you, because our number one source of leads, and I would say we probably get about a lead per week from our own mailing list, which we try to communicate to at least, let's say 2 times per month. So we call that top of mind awareness, but don't forget about your current customers and prospects who love you and want you to get more business, because they will refer you. I get tons of referrals just from the articles we might write. We push them out. Tommy probably still gets them. We push it out through our email list, and then we push it out through social media, and we see what gets engagement. So you want to do more of what is working and where you're getting engagement, and less of what isn't working. You know, Sharon, with video right now, a lot of our clients are doing tons of stuff now with video. It does seem to me to be getting higher engagement. And so if I do a video for LinkedIn, I also want to push that video out to my top of mind list. But if you notice, all of a sudden you're getting we may get 4 or 5 opt-outs for every email we send out. That's not too bad. But if all of a sudden you get 20 opt-outs, you might say, what was it about that email people didn't like? I don't want to do that again. So you do more of what works, less of what doesn't work. And you do want to track that by looking at the back end of whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook, etc. Also see what works best for your business. For some of my clients, like House Buyers of America, Facebook is way more important to him than LinkedIn, because he gets a lot more leads from that. One of our other clients, ADS, who's a government systems integrator, they get way more power from LinkedIn. Facebook is not very important to them. And, you know, Twitter isn't really important at all. So you really just need to see, okay, what's working for me, do more of that, what isn't, do less of that. But you always want to be thinking, all things aren't equal when it comes to PR at all. That's why we always try with our clients to say, okay, if this is our core list of 50 outlets, you know, print, broadcast, etc., we'll say to the client, what are your top 10? If you had a top 10 wish list, what would it be? And we take that top 10 and we keep our focus first and foremost on those publications and outlets. Sometimes they're, you know, CNBC for VJ, that was one of his top 10. AARP magazine, which has 23 million readers, was in his top 10, and others. Well, we're talking, and we've managed to get placements in 5 out of the top 10. So what I would say is this idea of who is my target market, what is that core list, and what's most important. You want to spend more time on what's most important, less time on what's not. So.
All right, we only have 2 minutes left. I want to give somebody a chance to ask a question. Jerry, did you have something?
Yeah, it was short. One was, this is great. I'm going to have to figure this into my budgeting and my planning for the year. The other thing is, thank you very much for the plug for 2020. I'm one of the original investors.
Great. Okay. Well, you know how well they're doing right now.
I know how they're doing. I know Jonathan's doing well. But
yeah.
I have a meeting starting in a minute. I just want to say thanks.
Okay,
and
great.
I will be pursuing the marketing.
Okay, good.
Sharon, go ahead.
I have a quick question, I hope. I was just wondering how you all do your pricing, if it's like per campaign or an annual cost. How do you figure that out?
So most of what we do are programs. So because of the need of the consistency over time, most of them are annual programs. We do have something we call Small Business Solutions, which is still a $5,000 per month program, but we price it at $2,500 a month, and that's a 4-month program. And that's a way for us to be able to work with smaller businesses with a specific scope that isn't a year, because our clients really range from startup all the way to billion-dollar organizations. So, so it really ranges. You know, it does range, but that's kind of where we fit in.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it is 1 o'clock. I always find it important to respect everybody's time. If Robyn, I don't know if you have time to just hang on for another 5-10 minutes if people want, to ask some specific questions, but I want to give her a big round of applause. Yay, very good. They were awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we can make your presentation slides available as well, right, Robyn?
Absolutely. Yep.